The behaviors are not your child. That is what today's guest would go back in time to tell his parents as they struggled with him as he had ADHD and was failing 5th grade, 8th grade, senior year, freshman year of college. This is a deeply emotional and beautiful episode, and I can't wait for you to dig into it, to find some answers and some hope, to find some encouragement and some inspiration if you're a chiropractor who is wanting to serve families. I'm Jenna Quentin, founder of Adjust Your Media and host of What Chiropractic Doesn't Cure, Stories of Innate podcast. And I really encourage you to check out the show notes. There's more ways that we can support and help you. And there is just so much in this episode that I would love for you to share it so that more families can get these answers and learn more about neuroplasticity and what is actually going on in their kids' brains and nervous systems. Today on What Chiropractic Doesn't Cure, Stories of Innate, we have Dr. Andy Kamerman, and he's a pediatric chiropractor at Radiant Life Chiropractic in Omaha, Nebraska. And what's cool is he has focused in on ADHD, anxiety, and angry meltdowns. So we're going to get into it. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always fun to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, well, we had such great conversations in Omaha a couple weeks ago that I was like, this would make a great podcast episode. So, as I always ask, tell us a story. Who and how did somebody get better, and how did chiropractic care play into that?
So that's so easy. We have so many stories, and we'll share a handful of them today, but I want to start with mine. So I have a lot of different ways that I share this story. So I'm going to try a different way because my mom shared this with me, about 9 months ago, I believe. So when I was in 7th grade, we were at student-teacher conferences, and I sat there while my mom, not particularly thrilled with what my social studies teacher was saying, told him, like, my son is telling you the truth. He's telling you that he did the assignment, and you're sitting here telling him that he didn't. And that did not go over well. She asked if I could go up to the room and grab the assignment and actually bring it back down to him. And so my teacher said, go ahead, like a really bad attitude.
Yeah.
But I grabbed his keys and I ran upstairs and I grabbed the assignment out of the drawer where he turned things in and I brought it back down to him. Now, he kept going through the conference as if nothing happened at all. But my mom knew at that point that teachers were labeling me. And so this teacher in particular was not a good teacher. I mean, I was abused by him emotionally. I watched him abuse a lot of other kids emotionally. And when kids can't help the way that they act, but they keep struggling with focus and turning things in, having big emotional reactions when they don't want to, or they're worried and nervous about everything without wanting to feel that way, that tells me there's a problem. And so it's okay to be overwhelmed. It's not okay to constantly be overwhelmed. Right? Like you said before we hopped on this, you're like, I have anxious tendencies sometimes, right? That's a real struggle. But if it's happening all the time, there's something causing it. So that day, my mom was pretty pissed. She realized how much I was suffering at that point, and she couldn't do anything about it. Now, my parents loved me a ton. They're both amazing teachers, but their kid is here failing 5th grade, 8th grade, senior year, got kicked out of school my freshman year in college. So not real great teacher kid, right? But both my parents, they watched me struggle and they literally couldn't do anything about it. My dad tried punishing me, simplifying my life so that I could actually achieve things, but it was just still overwhelming. And it actually built a lot of resentment in me because I couldn't help that overwhelm. And so my mom tried doing more things for me and making my life easier, but that actually just taught me not to be able to do a bunch of things. And I was still overwhelmed. Didn't help their relationship at all either. So again, here are my parents. They're doing everything that they can to help their son that they can see is struggling, but there's nothing they can do. One of the worst points was when my dad found out that I was smoking weed. So it is one of the things that really helped me get a break from all that struggle that was just constantly there. I just remember his face at the kitchen table, like crying. He was so sad and so ashamed that his son was skipping school and using drugs. To this day, it still crushes him. And it took many years for this to turn into a happy ending, but it ultimately did. I mean, we're here, right? Radiant Life is here serving kids. But all that struggling that I went through gave me the drive to serve families and kids who have sensory processing issues like ADHD, anxiety, and angry meltdowns, because these kids have great hearts. They're so smart. Parents cry in our office all the time and they tell me, my kid's so smart. I know they care so much. And God made these kids so amazing. These kids have no clue because they're struggling so hard. And parents have a clue. They understand this, but they're pissed and frustrated and overwhelmed because they don't know how to actually help their child, right? So I was on the path to become a reconstructive surgeon, and I was super passionate about it. I always love helping people and using my hands to do so. And my friend, he actually invited me to go hear a chiropractor, and I had no interest in going. Like, who wanted to hear, like, not a real medical profession, right?
Yeah.
So I went because he was my buddy. When I sat down, this chiropractor, I heard him speak and he said something extremely profound, really a sentence that was profound. And this sentence took all the years of my anatomy and physiology and neurology that I'd been taking and summed it all up. And what Dr. Garrett said was that your brain controls everything in your body. And if there's interference of that neurological control, your organs struggle to work. And therefore, you're going to have symptoms. And I just sat there, sat back and my jaw was just dropped. I struggled so much. My parents, we chose medications and we chose counseling, which I despised all of it because it just made me feel like something was wrong with me. And it really didn't ever help figure out what was happening. That sentence is so simple and easy to glance over how profound it is. We're chasing medications and behavioral therapies and parenting techniques without ever being taught to look at how well the brain can actually regulate what's going on in the body. You know this very well, but if the brain can't regulate what's going on in the body, how can you expect there to be emotional regulation? People don't feel good. And when we don't feel good, we're shut down, we're anxious, we're worried about everything, or we lash out, It's just how we're designed. So I don't like to say that chiropractic cures anything, especially because the world will boot you off the internet and censor you, right? But what I am saying is that it makes the life of kids a heck of a lot better, and really anybody who's struggling with sensory processing issues. And we help kids not get labeled by teachers like Mr. Jansen, my social studies teacher. We help give parents hope in times where everything else they've looked for, it doesn't give them hope. Everything is already in the kid's body. If the kid is struggling, we can help it work properly. If a parent is struggling, we just need to make sure that their brain can regulate things well. So that is my path going into chiropractic. And this took me on a massive path of figuring out the best tool for measuring how dysfunction in regulation actually happens. How do we measure it? How do we make sure we have success with this? Because if we are talking about good things, and I love chiropractic and the philosophy of chiropractic, but if we're not measuring things, then we're eating broccoli, right? And how much broccoli is enough?
Yeah.
How long do I need to eat broccoli? So I love being able to measure it, and so do parents. We know that the concept that the body needs to work better when it's not functioning well, when we're sick, symptoms, things like that. And everybody talks about that, including medical doctors, right?
Yeah.
And that's why we're all in the healthcare field in the first place. But very few doctors actually measure what they're talking about and then making sure that they have a process that will clear it up all the way and then measure when it's cleared up.
Yeah. So tell us more about the things that you use to measure function and dysfunction, because I know a little bit about this, and I think that it's also cool because it's not just in numbers, it's in visuals.
Absolutely. So visuals are so important for really anybody. We do get the nerdy person, like yesterday, this person was like, what are these numbers right here? What do those mean? That doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
But we have a visual. We use the CLA Insight subluxation station. There are lots of really cool things out there that can measure different aspects of neurology. But this lets us know the paraspinal muscle tone along the spinal cord, right? And if there's dysfunction there, it is just screaming at the brain, and the brain can't see the neurology that is passing through that part of the spine and the spinal cord. So the fancy words are like nociception, and this dysfunction of how the brain is trying to perceive the body.
Mm-hmm.
And the higher that is, the more irritated they are. And you can follow me at Radiant Life Omaha on social media, and you can see lots of examples of scans. More recently, it's mostly me talking about ADHD, but I will start posting more of these scans too. It's usually in our stories that you'll see them. But when it's dysfunctional, the brain it can't work.
Yeah.
Like literally a kid, an adult, they cannot regulate well. They cannot know peace and calm. It's just not possible.
Yeah. Well, and your story, I appreciate so much that you shared such an emotional and vulnerable story, because right now I have a 7th grader and an 8th grader, and thinking through like how they're experiencing life, and it's enough to just be 13.
Yeah.
And going through puberty and hormones trying to figure out and regulate. And I picked up my kids yesterday, and a littler kid was like, oh, Luca likes so-and-so. You know, they're dealing with enough stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those things, like you said, you know, we're not going to be able to manage or control all of the outside things for our kids. We're not going to be able to do their homework for them or create perfect systems. It all comes from that inside regulation that makes a chart system, a filing system, a calendar work. Yeah. Because otherwise, it's just the stuff.
Yep. It's more overwhelm.
It's more overwhelm.
Like Tony Ebel, Dr. Tony, he always talks about a cup that's overflowing. And I know he's on a previous podcast. Yeah. He talks about this cup that's overflowing. And when you have a cup that's overflowing, you can't shove another chart in there.
Yeah.
There's not space for it, right? Even with good intentions, it's still just massive overwhelm, which that's what really makes it hard.
Yeah. And I think through stories that I won't share yet, but with my own children's sensory processing struggles and struggles with anxiety and things. And like you said, we have done play therapy. We have done occupational therapy, and they've had deeply embarrassing moments, hard moments, struggles and challenges. And watching that as a parent, you know, I put myself in your mom's place when you want to believe that a teacher is on your kid's side, but they aren't, or they're not able to. And what a wonderful thing for parents to find that, like you said, all of the years of anatomy and physiology, when it clicks and it just makes sense. And I think that, like you said, the insight scans being able to show parents here and here, and it matches up. And this is where, like you said, chiropractic doesn't cure things, but it just makes sense. I think about my son as a 4 or 5-year-old. Maybe he was older than that, but we were at the zoo and he had scraped his elbow, and he flippin' loves the zoo. You know, this is the kid who would live at the zoo with the animals if possible, but he scraped his elbow and couldn't get over it. Massive meltdown. He's crying, he's screaming, he's kicking. You know, I'm hauling him into the bathroom, and I'm like, I'll give you cookies if you just calm down.
Right.
And then I'm like,
embarrassed.
You are going to have no screen time for the rest of your life if you don't calm down. And just where it is those moments of realizing, like, what is wrong? Like, clearly there's no punishment reward system. And the first time that I was told as a mother, it's his brain and his nervous system, and they're not communicating, I was like, oh, I see that. His brain couldn't communicate with his elbow to say, it's just a scrape.
Yep.
And being told that was life-changing.
Absolutely. And allowing parents to know that. And I love how other parents, they start telling other parents. It really starts, and I know Dr. Tony is really big on this, but chiropractors need to know with the most intense certainty of what they do. Don't promise things you can't deliver, but know when you are delivering things really, really well. And that's what the Insight Scan helps too. Like, I know when to refer out. I also know when to talk about a parent about screen time.
Yeah.
Or sugars or something like that. So it's not this big guessing game. And we've systematized that because for chiropractors, it's really tough as a professional to know when to do those things. And if you can systematize it, now you're going to make such a big difference, and you're going to have more success in your practice, which means more parents understanding what's going on. And then those parents going out, talking to other parents. We actually created, I want to say probably 4 months ago, a mom squad.
Nice.
where we got the parents that are the most excited about what we do and loving the changes that their kids have experienced. And we actually got them together. Tomorrow we have an event that we're doing just for them, where we're going to go have some fun, do some crafts at a cool spot in town, and just have dinner. Have fun. And it's all about getting that chiropractic story out. And they talk about referral sources and marketing, man. Like, what's cool is we feed into them because they truly are behind us, and we just get to spoil them a little bit and tell them they're doing a great job. Give them some private time to ask any questions that they have. And that's been a really fun way of adding some marketing to the chiropractic story.
I love that. So tell us some of the stories of things that are happening in your practice. I think that sometimes it sounds too good to be true, or it sounds very theoretical. So what are some of the hard, concrete facts? What's happening in your practice?
Yeah. So one other thing I'll share real quick, and it's easier for people to see if they're watching this, but we have a win journal. And it's so easy to put at the front desk. And we ask everybody, whenever they have a cool thing that they tell us, write it in the win journal.
I love that.
So many people come in and they write in the win journal before they even talk to us. And it's so fun when they come up and they just grab it. But we have so many stories, and we've been taking care of kids for a long time. So in a consult, there was a boy who bragged about kicking his sister in the face while she was sitting on the ground. How messed up is that?
Yeah.
When we showed him the scan the next day, we used to do a 2-day consult. When we showed him the scan, he goes, "Is that me?" It's like, "Yeah, buddy, that's you. That means your brain is really overwhelmed and it doesn't really feel good. It's hard to calm down." And he goes, "Does that mean when this goes away, I'm not going to be so angry?"
Buddy.
Talk about gut-wrenching and just tear-jerking, right? This little boy is looking me in the eyes. I believe he was like 12 at the time. He's looking me in the eyes, asking Dr. Andy, "Is that what this means?" So there's another little boy, hardest case we've ever had. I mean, we don't get scans with black on it. His is like 75% black. He was 5 years old. So this little boy got kicked out of every school. His mom ended up actually becoming our manager for a couple of years. He'd only been to 3 schools at the time because he was 5, right? He even got kicked out of the school that his mom was a director at. He got kicked out of a padded wall behavior day program. Like, they didn't know what to do with him. And so all the doctors could do was diagnose him with high intelligence. That's what they told mom. And he looked like a psychopath. That's the only way I can describe. His eyes are like big, and the only time he laughed was when other people got hurt. Like, creepy. But today, that boy, he scored the highest math score in his school, in his entire school. He plays sports. He has friends. And he's a typical boy now. That was probably back in 2016, I think, around that time. There was a teenage girl. She would scream at her mom. She would just lose her mind. Like, she seemed like a crazy girl. Like, I don't want to be around that girl. I'm sure that's what people at her school thought. Her parents didn't know what to do because it just didn't make sense. Like, why is she losing her mind? She was so sensitive. She would complain about riding in the car with her mom, or even if her mom was across the room at their house, because she was breathing. It was too loud and it irritated her. They used to spend quality time together because they were best friends, and they didn't get to do it anymore. Crazy. They found us, they came in, they followed the plan. We figured out what was amping her brain up. And it's really, really cool because once her brain actually started calming down, they were able to hang out again. They were able to eat dinner together. And so she went to trade school and she's just crushing it.
Yeah.
And I want to say, like, that's one of my favorite stories, but there's literally new ones every single week that we have at the office. I'll share one more story with you.
Yeah.
I got millions. But there's a little boy. He's one of the hardest cases we've ever taken care of. I actually have video. Mom and Dad don't ever want me to show it, so I show it very sparingly. But it's a video of him screaming his brains out on the way to my house at 10 p.m. at night. And I was like, "You can come over if you want to, but like, you live an hour away." And mom was like, "I don't care. Thank you so much. We'll be there." And so they drove all the way. I saw him for maybe like 2 minutes. They went home. She took a video of him on the way back home. And he was laughing and playing peekaboo with his blanket.
Yeah.
Wild, right? But this kid, he was 3. And his parents, they were already told by doctors that they need to get ready for him to live with them through adulthood. He was, the only way to describe him, and Dad described him like the Tasmanian devil because he would scream and cry and destroy everything and anything around him almost 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Just out of control. And so we took care of him, and it took about a year of care, which is a lot.
Yeah.
But he had no hope. His parents had no hope. And he actually just got, that was like in 2016 as well. He just got invited to play on the all-star baseball team in his city.
Yeah.
He has friends. He's smart. He's doing well in school. And the family, they literally don't walk on eggshells anymore. When that is literally how they lived their life.
Yes.
He would rip like the house apart in the middle of the night with night terrors.
Yeah.
And they couldn't do anything because it would just last all night and nobody slept at all then. So they would sit there and watch for like an hour or so.
Yeah.
Pick it up in the morning.
Well, and the term that I hope parents know and learn here is neuroplasticity.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that our brains can change and grow, especially, and tell me if I'm wrong, but small children whose brains have not finished developing. And I love it that the more I learn with research from Heidi Havoc and other researchers and things, I need the general population version, not the complete sciencey version, but the fact that anybody's brain has some neuroplasticity. But when we're talking about a 3-year-old, if our brains are only 90% developed by the time you're about 5, a 3-year-old, you're like, let's go now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. If we can get a hold of young kids, and honestly, my favorite age group is probably 2 or 3 years old until probably like 12 years old, because those are the formative years. They have so much opportunity. And like you said earlier, the struggle of social pressures is real. Early on, it's social pressures on parents mostly. And then later on, it becomes social pressures of the kids.
Yeah.
And I'm like, kids are jerks.
Yeah.
I was. And I had a lot of sensory processing things. I think of so many kids back in my school time where I like to picture looking around the room, seeing these couple kids struggling who are in special needs classes. And they literally their brain was just massively overwhelmed. And so, not that they shouldn't have access to those classes, because they absolutely should get support when they need it. But if you can make it so they don't need support, oh man, their life is totally different.
Yes.
Completely different. Yeah.
And, I think that all of this is so accessible for parents, for anybody to understand, for chiropractors to understand, because I think we all have glimpses of it, either in ourselves, in our family. Maybe we're like, okay, maybe not to quite that degree, but we get glimpses of it. So, before we started, I said, okay, I'm going to make sure that it's recording and I almost said like, I'm an anxious person, but I truly am terrified of not recording. But instead trying to say I have anxious tendencies, and at some point maybe I should just say anxiety's not winning today. And I'm on the countdown to get adjusted this afternoon. But we can all understand those times where we're like, I am just off today. I don't know. I have the same chunk of time to get the same tasks done, and I just can't. Or like you said, the teenage girl whose mom was breathing across the room. We've all been there. My love language is touch, and yet my husband came to give me a kiss the other day, and I was eating lunch over the computer, doing something on the computer, and he kissed my neck, and I elbowed him. And it was like, I'm sorry, I am overstimulated. I am overwhelmed. Go away. And so we can understand those moments where, what if that was my constant experience? What if, even though I love to be hugged, I couldn't accept it because my brain and system were overwhelmed all the time, and I couldn't even get the hug that I deeply need because I was so overwhelmed. And even in that moment, I was not connected enough to put down my food, stop what I was doing on the computer, and be like, yes, I would like a kiss. I would like a hug. So if that's a child's constant experience, and they don't have these other tools, to say, oh, I usually like touch, but it's kind of annoying me right now. A 2-year-old doesn't know that many words yet. So I love that this is something that is really accessible for all of us to learn about.
Yeah, and it's a big deal when there's a kid who can't communicate. They don't know why they feel that way. I mean, I remember it very clearly growing up. I ended up getting help when I was about 27, and my brain's calm now, and it's so cool. Life is totally different as an adult. Parents ask us all the time, like, when did I miss my point? Or can I not bring my kid in and it won't work? I was like, actually, no, you're a human, right? We all have the ability to regulate. There's just that aspect with young kids where we can form a lot of their brain really, really quickly. And then once it is calmed down, we've seen kids come back 2 years later and their skin's still clear. We want that regulatory system happening. And in those cases, I hadn't even touched the kid. We want kids to be able to self-regulate, and adults, but we also want to equip them simply and quickly. We don't need to go around picking up every banana peel like BJ Palmer said, but simply quickly understand what stress does to their body so that they, in this new aware state, they can avoid those major stressors and not cause that neurology to get all hypersensitive again. And they can just live. And if they do need another therapy afterwards, like you said, play therapy, occupational therapy, there's so many really good things out there. But those therapies will now excel because a kid's brain feels calm and ready to actually process things. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I know that we could keep talking forever, and we will probably talk again because, like you said, new stories every day, so why not? We want to share all of them, but I'm going to put all of your links for people to find you and see these stories, see these scans in the show notes, so be sure to go to the show notes and find those. But is there anything that you would want to tell parents, especially like going back to your story at the beginning? What do you wish that someone had told you or your mom at that point?
It sucks to watch your kid struggle. It really does. And the kid that you see that is loving and smart and creative, even if it's only glimpses that you get of that kid, that is your real child. That is who God created them to be. The behaviors are because something is causing their brain to be overwhelmed. The behaviors are not your child. So never stop figuring out why their brain is overwhelmed. And maybe it is one stop at our office. As far as like we put together a care plan and we clear up that neurology and then their life is totally different. Sometimes it is multiple steps. But if you don't quit, the brain will self-regulate and will come back to calm. That's what I'd tell every parent.
Awesome. Amen. I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for all you do. I appreciate it greatly.